Okay, now season 4, episode 4 of Theboys was insane, and I just want to give it to Anthony Starr. He was amazing, right? I mean, like, his acting was superb in this episode, and just him as Homelander, his acting as Homelander was just incredible, and it really does make Homelander one of the greatest TV villains of all time. And in today's video, I just want to talk about that episode specifically, and I want to talk about Homelander's revenge. I just want to explain it and what he went through as a child, and how do these events affect him as a character in the future, and how will it affect the season and season 5 later on. So please stay tuned. And now, before we actually get into the video, I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I would like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into the video. And now, Homelander's revenge in this episode was insane. And you know, like, I just want to start off of his intentions of going. So in the end of episode 3, we did see Homelander talking to himself in the mirror, like, you know, his multiple personalities in his head, speaking to him and telling him to go to the start, which is where he got experiments done on him and where he was technically born. And this is because he wants to remove that feeling of being wanted, loved, and approved. And so his other personalities, right, like, you know, himself in the reflection, they tell him to go back to the start. And of course, that's where it all started, right? You know, like, I want to explain that later on in the video as to why Homelander always had that need in his head that, like, you know, I want everyone to love me, I want to be approved, I just want to be, like, you know, really good in everyone's eyes. And so this is the episode where Homelander truly loses his humanity, and the little part that made him human was that he wanted to be loved and approved. But now in this episode, he totally got rid of that feeling, and now basically what Homelander thinks is that he transcended his humanity. And so when Homelander does go into the lab in episode 4 of season 4, it's a very tense scene. And, you know, this is all because of Anthony Starr's acting as Homelander. And usually whenever Homelander's on screen, like, you know, it feels tense and stuff like that. It feels like, you know, this guy could do whatever he can, right? Whenever Homelander's on screen, it's an insanely tense moment. But this just jacked it up to 100, right? Like, the way that Homelander entered, the way that all of the scientists were afraid, and just knowing the sheer power and strength Homelander had, and also his insanity, right? Like, you know, him being a total psychopath in that situation after, like, you know, taking down their communication systems and cameras and stuff like that. It's just the scientists and Homelander in an underground bunker, in an underground lab, and Homelander could really do whatever he wants. And so yeah, he came to get his revenge on the scientists that basically tortured him. So when Homelander does go into the lab, he starts off pretty well, right? You know, I mean, everyone does know his intentions are bad, and that scene in general is really tense, but, you know, in a Homelander fashion, he goes with the cake. And so, like, he treats it as like a welcome back type of situation, like welcome back home. And then he just starts killing scientists, right? He starts off with Frank, one of the scientists that were there when he was a child, and he starts off with putting him in a oven that could fit a human in. And his revenge there is that Frank was there when he was being put into that oven, and he was being burnt. Even though it did not kill Homelander, it did hurt a lot, while Frank was throwing crumpled up paper into a garbage bin. And then he goes on to Marty, and this scene right here is probably the best part of the episode. I'm not saying that, like, you know, what Homelander did was good, but just like the effect that the scene had is crazy. And, like, you know, I don't want to go into too much detail of it, but this is where you see Homelander fully going insane, right? You know, like, a lot of people are comparing this to Heath Ledger's Joker, and I think Homelander did deserve that place in one of the best villains of all time. It's because his laugh and just the way that he treats it, right? Like, he's seeing it as like a game, right? Like fun, and then he just kills Marty. And then we see Barbara, like one of the head scientists, coming into the lab, and she does explain a lot about how they treated Homelander and just what the scientists were doing, right? Like whose orders they were taking. And they were mainly taking Barbara's orders and also Stan Edgar's orders and also Dr. Vogelbaum's orders. And so she does explain that Homelander was basically engineered to have this need for love and attention. And she does explain that this is the only part of him that really does make him human. And she's basically trying to make like a Stan Edgar type of scene here, right? Like she's trying to intimidate Homelander so then he could leave. And she does also explain that they did call the best therapists and the psychologists in the world to basically make Homelander more disciplined and to make him follow orders, which we did see in season 1 that Homelander was afraid, not really afraid, but he was taking orders from Vought and he would do whatever they would say. For example, we saw this a lot with Madeline Stillwell and Stan Edgar, but I want to say Stan Edgar especially because he is one of the only characters in this show that fully shows Homelander the truth and really talks up to him, and Homelander does not do anything at all. We even saw until season 3 and also in season 2 where Homelander was intimidated by Stan so many times, and even though Stan is human, just Stan showing Homelander the mirror, right? Like, just showing Homelander the truth about himself, that he's only a man-child and he is not their most valuable asset. It's actually Compound V. It really does hit Homelander's ego back in season 2. And every scene that Stan Edgar would show up in with Homelander, like I would always think that this scene, Stan's gonna die, like over and over and over again. I would think that, but that was not the case, and that's because of his days in the lab, right? Homelander was basically taught to be disciplined, and also because of his lack of love and also the lack of approval from that he got. And even they did explain in this episode that Homelander does not want to disappoint all of these scientists, right? Like he basically had that feeling, right? Like where he would constantly want to make them proud, even though he does not show it, he would want that. But like how I mentioned before, in this episode, he's trying to overcome that feeling, and Barbara did think that this would work, right? Like even she does explain that these scientists were taking orders and they were just afraid. But Homelander retaliates and he says that none of them had the guts to say no. Like none of them had the guts to say that any of this was wrong. And I'm not saying that Homelander is right in this situation, but realistically, if you look at it, if Homelander was given some love, he would be totally different by now, right? And so yeah, all these scientists did do their part in making Homelander what he is today. For example, with Marty making fun of him, and also Frank. I mean, the whole part with Frank was a little stupid, right? Because he's not technically the one that put him into the oven. He was just in the background. But again, Homelander does think that these are the people I wanted to get approval from, these are the people I want to get love from, and these are the same people that did not stand up for me when I needed most. But I want to backtrack a bit of when Barbara actually came, right? When Barbara does enter this scene, she tells Homelander to put Marty out of his misery, and it seems like Barbara is one of those people, for example, like Stan Edgar and Stillwell, that he does listen to her, right? As soon as she said that put Marty out of his misery, he does it right away, even though it is really brutal, and but he still does it. And with Barbara, it does seem like that she might tame Homelander, but Homelander's intentions are to overcome that feeling and to get his revenge on everyone. So he explains to Barbara that this room is called the bad room, the room with the red door on it, where he used to basically live and be watched all the time by the scientists. So he explains to Barbara that I'm gonna tell you why I used to call this the bad room. And so the scene cuts off, right? We see a couple of other scenes with other characters. And then the end of the episode, we see that Homelander killed the room full of scientists, right? He put them all into that room and he killed all of them in very brutal ways, right? We're just seeing blood and guts and just their bodies all over the floor and on the wall and stuff like that, and we only see Barbara alive. But a very interesting detail about this scene is that Homelander welded the door shut, so he is trying to psychologically torture Barbara, right? And he didn't instantly kill her because she was trying to get the best of him, so he wanted to show her an example of, I don't need your love and approval anymore, and I don't need any of this. Look what I could do, and I don't want you to be proud of me. I don't care if you're disappointed in me or anything like that. I want to torture you like how you did to me. So he kept Barbara alive, and we're seeing Barbara just terrified in this scene, just looking around, and she has no way to get out. So she's probably gonna die of starvation, or if she is able to get out, she's gonna have the same triggers as Homelander. Basically, she's gonna remember this room, like whenever anything happens, or if she even sees Homelander on TV, or just constantly in a state of torture. And we have been seeing Homelander throughout the seasons. He's keep on getting flashbacks and dreams of the lab, and he's getting some sort of PTSD from it. So again, I'm not saying that Homelander is right here, but he did get his revenge at the end of the day, and the people that ridiculed him and made him the person that he is today, he basically broke free of that whole thing of being wanted and loved, right? And that was Homelander's whole thing. That was the whole thing that was really keeping him on the leash, is that he wanted people to love him. But going back to this lab, he really did overcome that feeling, and that scene with Marty and Barbara was especially brutal. And so basically he gave Barbara the taste of her own medicine, right? Like, you know, he thinks that she tortured him. I got PTSD today, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna keep you alive. I'm gonna make you watch me killing all these scientists, old and new, people that I don't know and people that I do know, right in front of you. I'm gonna weld the door shut and give you this mental image of horror, and even if you do get out, you won't be able to recover from it, like just like how Homelander did. And Homelander acts normal because he is that strong, right? He's that powerful, and he gets love and fame from everyone, but he still does get PTSD from those days in the lab. Now, first I want to talk about why this scene was so great. And you know, like, I haven't seen anyone talk about this, but this scene really did remind me of the lineup from The Walking Dead. And I know I'm a huge Walking Dead fan, but this scene really did remind me of Negan's lineup. So basically it has the same beats to it, right? Like, Homelander, he comes and he corners all these scientists, and they have no way to get out. Just like how Negan, he cornered the group and they had no way to get out, and also he killed Glenn and Abraham in front of Rick and his group, and they basically couldn't do anything about it. Just like this scene, Homelander killed Frank and Marty in front of the other scientists, and he is laughing like a psychopath doing it. He's making jokes and stuff like that, and the other scientists couldn't do anything, right? They couldn't escape. They couldn't even, like, see the surveillance cameras. They couldn't call anyone. They were stuck in there with Homelander, a guy that is laughing like a psychopath, killing like two people in really brutal ways, right? And making jokes about it and making it seem like that he came just for peace, right? He came just for a visit, but then he's killing them and he's acting so normal about it, which makes this scene so much better, right? Like, you know, Anthony Starr's acting in this episode alone was fabulous, and I think that he does deserve an award for his acting in this episode. And you really do feel like you're one of the scientists in that lab. And yeah, that's why I think that this scene was so great, and it really would go down in history as one of the best TV episodes of all time, and Homelander would go down as one of the best TV villains of all time. So yeah, what does this mean, right? Like, what could happen after this episode? And I know that I'm very late in reviewing this episode in any sort of way. That's why I didn't make a full episode review, and that's because I just didn't have time to review this episode. I didn't have time to make a video on it. So but this scene with Homelander in general really made me so intrigued, and there were so many things that could happen because of the events of this episode. So as we all know, Homelander transcended his humanity in a way, right? Quote unquote transcended his humanity, basically throwing out that little bit of him that really makes him human, the only bit of him that really makes him feel emotional or anything like that. He went down there, he killed them, and he's basically free now. And that final scene of him filled with blood and smiling, that's him thinking to himself that I've finally done it, I'm free now. So now what we could see in the next episodes is that Homelander is fully gonna go insane. He's probably gonna kill people in public without a second thought, without any care in the world. He wouldn't even care about the stock prices of Vought. He wouldn't even care about his position as the head of Vought, right? And so yeah, like I think that this is gonna lead up to the season finale, where it's called Assassination Run, and a lot of people are thinking that A-Train has something to do with that. Maybe A-Train might die in that episode, or Homelander riles up a bunch of soups together and they take over the White House. And like how it was mentioned before, right, like the showrunner did state that season 5 is the last season of The Boys, so it makes a lot of sense that this scene could lead up to that moment in the comics where a bunch of soups led by Homelander take over the White House, and they basically take over America, and their next mission would be to take over the world. And I think that season 5 is gonna revolve all around that. Maybe the soups do end up taking over, and like how Joe Kessler did say in episode 1 of season 4 that like, you know, it's a matter of time before all of the soups put us into camps. I think that would be the whole basis of season 5, Homelander being leader of the United States, and he riles up all these soups and they put normal humans into camps. And of course we would have some soups that are actually good, right? Maybe like A-Train, right? A-Train is a good soup now, right? We've seen that in season 4. Maybe the Deep, of course Starlight also, maybe if Maeve takes Compound V again, right? Because like again in the end of season 3, Maeve is a normal human now, so maybe Maeve takes Compound V again, she gets her powers back. Maybe like Ryan has his 1v1 with Homelander, right? Maybe Ryan does grow up a bit by season 5 and he's actually able to take on Homelander. And Butcher does see in this season that we need to train Ryan so he could kill Homelander, because realistically Ryan is the only one to kill Homelander. But yeah, that's it for today's video. I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I would like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for watching.